Good morning. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Today we're going to cover Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 through 18, and it's called the false prophet. The spirit of Antichrist, described by John in 1 John, is prevalent on an earth where Satan has been given dominion. Most of us simply overlook the pervasiveness of sin, pervasiveness of lies, and ignore that we live in a world that is getting worse by the day. Because history repeats itself, many think that it has always been this way. But scripturally, that does not make sense. If it was always that way, then why would God finally say that enough is enough? Just because of more of the same? Instead, it is much more likely that similar to a snowball rolling down a hill, that snowball is growing larger and moving faster. Atheism is increasing, particularly in the younger generations. Church attendance is decreasing, and churches that teach sound biblical doctrine are disappearing. God does not want to be an afterthought in our daily lives. He wants to be the priority. Without His Son and the works of His Son, all of us are dead, zombies, stumbling around this Satan-dominated world. Let's get a refresher of what John had to say about the Antichrist in 1 John chapter 2, verses 18 through 23. Little children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come, by which we know that it is the last hour. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. But they went out that they might be made manifest, that none of them were of us. But you have an anointing from the Holy One, and you know all things. I have not written to you because you do not know the truth, but because you know it, and that no lie is of the truth. Who is a liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist, who denies the Father and the Son. Whoever denies the Son does not have the Father either. He who acknowledges the Son has the Father also. In John's day, he identified the time in which he was living as the last hour. And while we also are in the last hour, the clock has continued ticking for almost 2,000 years. Truth is just as important today as it was in John's time. People are still asking today what Pontius Pilate asked of Jesus. What is truth? Jesus is the truth. John makes sure that we understand that a statement or belief that is 99.9% truth and only 0.01% lie is not truth by preponderance of the mixture. Instead, it is a lie. A little bit of a lie goes a long way. Lies are everywhere in our society. When we look up the word politician in the dictionary, we would expect to see a picture of Pinocchio. Regardless of our political candidate of choice, that candidate will tell lies. Likely that is one of the reasons that the political arena is not a place for a godly man. He will be called to lie for the betterment of the party. While we can understand that we will not be privy to all information, most of us would prefer hearing that information is above your pay grade to just a lie, even from someone that God has placed to rule over us. Don't forget, Satan is the great deceiver, and those who follow him will have that same skill set. While there are antichrists all around us, a time is coming when the Antichrist will rule the world. And yes, that is the same world that Satan already has dominion over. But before going back to our passage in Revelation, take these words from John to heart. The worst lie is to deny Jesus Christ. That means to deny He lived, deny that He died, and deny that He was resurrected. Sadly, there are church pastors who do not believe in the resurrection of Jesus. John also tells us that any person who denies the Father and the Son is an antichrist. That means the spirit of Satan is guiding them. The spirit of antichrist is prevalent in our world today, but it will get worse. Let's finish Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 through 18 says this. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666, or 666. In Revelation, we see 2 beasts. One comes out of the earth, and the other comes out of the sea. Theologians believe that the beast who will come out of the sea will wield political power, while the beast who will come out of the earth will wield spiritual power. Earlier in this chapter, Revelation 13, verse 7, John told us that the beast out of the sea, the Antichrist, would have power or authority over all people worldwide. The verse said, and authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. This second beast has some similarities to the first beast, but is described as having 2 horns like a lamb and will speak like a dragon. That is 8 less horns than the Antichrist. Though they are both demonic, perhaps this description of a lamb with 2 horns is telling us that he will appear to be gentler than the Antichrist. But remember these words from Jesus concerning false prophets. Matthew 7, verses 15 through 23 says this, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Speaking like a dragon is to lie. As earlier in Revelation, we saw Satan identified as the dragon, and he is the great deceiver. Throughout man's history, there has been an attraction to the spiritual. When living on an earth that is larger than life, and with planets and stars in the distance even larger, it is natural to know there is something much bigger than us and a creator much larger than all we can see. But it also is difficult to grasp good without evil, light without dark, and truth without deception. In preparation for this last attack on earth, Satan will lead an inspired cast of characters. He will not be content with sending a false prophet into a church, but will instead attempt to send that false prophet in on a much larger stage to fool the world. But the false prophet still will be a wolf in sheep's clothing. That is deception. He will seem much more palatable, will tickle the ears of the people with truth interspersed with lies, and the biggest lie will be to get the people to ignore God and worship Satan. That has been Satan's goal all along. The false prophet will have just as much authority as the first beast, the Antichrist, which means that he also will be on the world stage. But the goal of the false prophet will be to get people to worship the Antichrist. Once again, we live in a culture that has greatly changed. In the last 100 years, try to think of examples when the population worshiped a politician or put them on a higher platform than those who came before. Hitler comes to mind, but even though he spoke to the nationalistic pride of the German people and inspired them in that manner, he scared German people too. We can differentiate between a God who loves us and gives us free will whether or not to love him back, and a dictator who requires love, obedience, and worship from people with a penalty of death to those who will not give it. In this second example, people might appear to love, appear to worship, and appear to obey. But as only as out of fear, it is not really love. God wants us to love him because of his love for us, not because we are afraid of the penalties if we don't. No politician should be worshiped, and no world leader should either, except Jesus when he will rule and reign on the earth for 1,000 years. The false prophet will promote worship of the Antichrist, which is the worship of Satan, even if the people don't know that. Earlier, we have discussed a deadly head wound that the Antichrist survives. Many theologians think that description is symbolic, representing something similar to surviving a scandal in his career. But this verse seems to connect surviving that mortal wound to worship of the Antichrist. Once again, the wound appeared to be fatal, but that does not mean that it was fatal. If Satan does not have power over death, the power to resurrect, it seems to be an attempt at copying Jesus in yet another way. Jesus was resurrected, and because of that event, the worship of Jesus began to spread across the world. That is Satan's goal. He wants to be worshiped like Jesus, instead of Jesus, an offense to Jesus. We have previously read about the two witnesses who have the God-given powers to perform all of the plagues that occurred in Egypt at the hand of Moses, and also can stop the sky from raining and cause it to rain, as Elijah did. It is for these reasons that we guess the two witnesses are Elijah and Moses. But remember that Pharaoh's magicians copied some of these signs and wonders, and the false prophet will also perform signs and wonders, including calling down fire from heaven. Satanic powers are real, even though they seem to copy what God gave to the two witnesses. These will be lying wonders, according to Paul. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 8 through 10 says this, "And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. Many will follow the Antichrist and false prophet because of these powers, signs, and lying wonders. We can think back to the crowds that followed Jesus to see his miracles. Sadly, many people were drawn to him because of those miracles, but missed out on his words, his promises, and his love. It is hard to picture the science over religion crowd worshiping the Antichrist, but the false prophet will likely have some glib explanation that will draw even those people to worship the Antichrist. After all, their allegiance is not with God. The false prophet will inspire men to create an image to the Antichrist because of his survival from a wound that seemed to be lethal. The next description is demonic and supernatural. The false prophet will be given power to give breath to the image created of the Antichrist, and the image will be able to speak and to kill those who do not worship the image. Once again, this points to the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, Jesus, and John. First of all, this power is not given by God, but given by Satan. We cannot begin to know what this will be like. But with robotics, holograms, and artificial intelligence, combined with John's unfamiliarity with any of these scientific advancements, we cannot really know what exactly will occur. But this verse sure sounds like it will amaze people of that time so much that they will choose to worship the image of the Antichrist. It sounds like more than a scientific trick. Finally, we hear the description of the mark of the beast. Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 through 17 says, "He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." It would seem that some kind of technology is involved here. In the 1980s, we began microchipping dogs for identification. And since that time, there has been an increase in fear concerning this technology. There also have been microchips implanted in people, with health records, identity, and payment information accessible instantaneously from those chips. They usually have been RFID chips, which are radio frequency identification, or NFC chips, near field communication, inserted between the thumb and index finger. In addition, who would have predicted that every single person would carry a smartphone around with them? And that smartphone would include the ability to receive a phone call or a text message anywhere, email, or even a pocket-sized library of accessible information. The newest iPhone is adding artificial intelligence features. Regardless of the direction that AI and technology are heading, we know from the words of John that the false prophet will implement a program where only the worshipers of the Antichrist will receive this mark, enabling them to buy and sell. That will be a time when people will have to decide between physical food and spiritual food. If someone receives the mark of the beast, it will be out of allegiance to the Antichrist, and biblically, it appears to be that it is an irreversible decision. In Exodus 16:16, Deuteronomy 6:8, and Deuteronomy 11:18, the Israelites were told to wear reminders of God's law on their foreheads and hands. Frontlets, also called phylacteries, were small boxes that contained verses from the Torah, written on parchment, and worn by the Jews. In addition, we can see in multiple verses in Revelation that God's name is written on the foreheads of the saints. That is ownership, and it is likely that Satan tries to copy God in yet another way with his name on the foreheads of those who worship his beast, with his words on their foreheads. It also sounds like anyone who takes this mark of the beast will be past the point of God's redemption. Revelation chapter 14, verses 9 through 11 says this, "Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, 'If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name.'" It might be difficult for people to choose not to take the mark. Think of a father with children. Taking the mark might be the only way of feeding his children. And remember that half of the world's population is already gone. With all of the previous judgments on the land and on the people of the land, it is highly doubtful that farm-grown food will still exist in large quantities. The rich might still have the money to buy food, but as their buying and selling also will be limited by whether or not they have this mark of the beast, choices quickly will dwindle. What if we were forced to choose between starvation and allegiance to Satan? It seems that Jesus gave us a perfect example of the right choice when Satan asked him to turn the stones into bread in the wilderness. Years ago, when thinking about the mark of the beast, my thoughts went to the Jewish people of the world. After all, they are God's chosen people, and his focus is on them and the tribulation. It has not been that many years since there was a mark tattooed on their arms. As of January 2024, there were still 245,000 Holocaust survivors alive on the earth. Jews repetitively uttered the phrase, "never again," referencing that they will never again ignore anti-Semitism, making sure it does not again lead to genocide. Isn't it interesting that Satan's plan has not changed? That is still what he wants, the genocide of the Jewish people. And in order to be spared, the Jews alive in the Great Tribulation will have to take a mark on their arm again in order to survive. What a quandary. Of course, this does not include the people of Israel, whom God will be feeding in the wilderness. I often have thought that most Jews will refuse to receive the mark of the beast because of what happened in World War II. That decision will buy them time. As the Great Tribulation approaches the end, the despotic behavior of the Antichrist and false prophet will only increase. Their hatred of God will also increase. And for those who have not yet made the decision to follow Jesus, if they have not taken the mark, they still will be able to choose Jesus. Wouldn't it be amazing if the horrors that happened to the Jews in World War II could actually spare them in the Great Tribulation? And finally, we get to the final verse in this chapter, telling us that he who has understanding can calculate the number of the beast, 666. No person has yet deciphered this, though many have tried. In the Antichrist-related movie, The Omen, the Antichrist had a birthmark of 3 6s on his head below his scalp. The Left Behind books depicted this as the subcutaneous microchip implanted beneath the skin of those wanting to buy or sell. In Koine Greek, the word 666 is made up of the Greek letters chi, xi, and stigma, with stigma being a sigma and a tau. Stigma means mark or dot in Greek. Each letter also has a numerical value. Chi has a value of 600, xi has a value of 60, and stigma has a value of 6. None of this adds any understanding to the identity of the Antichrist for me. What does make sense is that numbers also have meanings in the Bible. For example, 8 points to new beginnings, and 7 is the number of God. We have seen many 7s in Revelation, and it signifies both perfection and completeness. Interestingly, 6 is the number of man. After all, God created man on the 6th day, and man is incomplete without God. If the number of God's Trinity is 777, the number of Satan's Trinity is 666. It is the number of man according to this verse in Revelation. The number of sin, the number of incompleteness. But that being said, we are nearing the point that God will complete this world. I bet Christians in the tribulation will have more of an understanding of the 666, but we simply cannot guess, unless the books sealed up by Daniel are unsealed. As we close today's lesson, be keenly aware of lies, of wolves in sheep's clothing, of deception. Everyone, everything we hear, we should balance against God's word to ensure we are not being fooled. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Have a blessed day.